A storm rolled down from the mountains like a gray wall, swallowing the forest in snow and silence. The tall pines bent with the weight of ice, and the air was so cold it cut through even the thickest coat. Daniel had been working far from town that day, chopping trees near the ridge where no one usually went. He was a strong man, built from years of hard labor, but even he could feel the cold crawling under his skin. When his wagon's wheel cracked on a rock and the mule panicked, he knew he wouldn't make it back to his cabin before night. The wind howled like a living thing, and his breath came out in clouds that vanished into the blizzard. He pressed forward through the snow, his boots sinking deep with every step, until his eyes caught the outline of something dark ahead. It was a cave entrance hidden partly by pine branches and heavy snow. He had seen it once before from a distance but never thought to go inside. Now, with the cold biting hard and the storm closing in, it looked like the only chance to survive the night. Daniel stepped inside, shaking snow from his coat. The air was still cold, but it was calm, sheltered from the screaming wind outside. The ground was uneven, covered in bits of stone and dirt. He gathered a few dry branches from his pack and lit a small fire, watching the orange light chase away the shadows. The warmth began to spread slowly, and he sighed in relief. But just as the crackling flames grew brighter, something at the back of the cave moved. At first he thought it was an animal, maybe a wolf drawn by the firelight, but then a soft sound reached him, a quick breath almost like a gasp. His eyes adjusted to the dim light, and that's when he saw her. A woman stood near the far wall, half hidden behind some rocks and animal skins. Her face was calm but wary, her dark hair braided loosely over her shoulder. She wasn't afraid, but she was ready to defend her space. Daniel froze in surprise. He took a step back and raised his hand slightly to show he meant no harm. The woman's eyes followed his every move. He spoke softly, saying he didn't know anyone lived there, that he only came in to stay out of the storm. For a moment she said nothing. Then her lips moved, her voice quiet and deliberate. "Storm," she said, pointing outside. "Stay till morning." Her accent was thick, her words few, but her meaning was clear. He nodded gratefully and kept a respectful distance. The firelight revealed more of the cave now. She had made it into a home. There were dried herbs hanging from a thin string, some clay jars arranged neatly, and a blanket made of animal hide laid out near the wall. She had clearly been living there for some time. They stayed mostly silent as the storm raged outside. Daniel added more wood to the fire while she watched him cautiously. After a while, he took a small piece of bread from his pocket and offered it to her. She hesitated, then accepted it with a nod. She broke it in two and gave half back to him. It was a small gesture, but one that melted the ice between them. As the hours passed, the storm grew louder, and the wind pushed snow against the cave entrance. Daniel looked around and noticed a gap near the entrance where cold air leaked in. He moved a few rocks to block it, and the woman, whose name he learned was Nayeli, helped him quietly. They worked side by side without needing many words. When they finished, the cave felt warmer, safer. When Daniel sat back down, Nayeli poured something from one of her jars into a small pot and placed it near the fire. The smell was earthy and strange, but pleasant. She handed him a small bowl when it was ready. He took a sip. It was warm, made from herbs and melted snow, maybe something she had learned from her people. He thanked her softly. For a long time, neither spoke. Outside, the snow continued to fall endlessly. Inside, the fire flickered against the walls, casting soft light on their faces. Daniel studied her quietly. There was a sadness in her eyes, but also strength. He asked gently how long she had been living there. She looked into the fire and said, "Since my husband passed." Her English was broken but clear. She explained that her husband had worked with the same trees Daniel now cut, that he had died one winter years ago. The land held their memories, so she never left it. Daniel listened carefully, feeling something stir inside him. He didn't know what to say, but he understood loss. He told her that he too lived alone in a small cabin not far from town. His wife had passed years ago, and he never found comfort again. The words came slowly, quietly, almost as if speaking them would bring the pain back. The storm outside screamed like ghosts in the trees. Inside the cave, it was just the two of them, two lonely souls sharing one small light. Nayeli looked at him then, her expression softening. "You're not like others," she said in a low voice, almost like she didn't mean to say it out loud. Daniel looked back at her and smiled faintly. They sat there for hours, sharing warmth and silence. When the fire began to fade, he got up to gather a few more branches. She watched him go, then placed another hide near the fire for him to sleep on. It was the first time in years that either of them felt a sense of peace. As Daniel lay down, he listened to the sound of the wind dying slowly outside. The last thing he saw before falling asleep was the dim glow of the fire reflecting in Naeli's eyes, calm and steady like the heart of the mountain itself. When he woke the next morning, the storm had eased and pale sunlight touched the cave walls. Naeli was already awake, sitting by the fire, her hands busy mending something with thin thread. She looked up and gave a small nod as he stretched. Daniel smiled back, feeling gratitude he couldn't quite put into words. He stepped outside briefly and saw the world buried under thick snow. The trees stood silent, heavy with white. For a moment he felt the quiet peace of the mountains in his chest. When he turned back to the cave, he realized it wasn't just a place of shelter anymore. It had become something more. A memory that would stay with him long after the snow melted. Inside, Naeli poured him another bowl of her herbal drink. He accepted it with a thankful nod. Neither spoke much, but neither needed to. The warmth between them was quiet, simple, and real. It was a night neither of them had expected. A night when two strangers, both marked by loss, found comfort in the stillness of the storm. That morning, Daniel knew the cave had saved more than just his body. It had reminded him that kindness and understanding could still exist in the coldest places on earth. The morning sun reached the edge of the cave, touching the stone walls with soft gold light. The storm had passed, leaving behind a world covered in white silence. Daniel stepped outside and looked around. The forest looked different now, calm and peaceful, as if nothing terrible had ever happened. The snow reached up to his knees and the air was sharp and clean. He took a deep breath, watching his breath drift into the cold morning air. Behind him, Naeli was kneeling near the fire, feeding it with small sticks, her movements quiet and practiced. Daniel went back inside and smiled a little. "It's a fine morning," he said. She looked up, not fully understanding the words, but she smiled faintly anyway. The warmth of the fire touched both their faces. She handed him a wooden bowl with something warm inside, a simple drink made from herbs and snowmelt. It wasn't strong, but it chased away the chill in his bones. He thanked her softly and sat near the fire. They didn't talk much, but silence between them wasn't uncomfortable. There was an understanding now, a kind of peace that didn't need words. Daniel noticed how neatly she kept everything in the cave, the jars, the hides, the small pile of firewood. It showed her discipline and strength. She had built her own world out here, far from towns or noise. It wasn't luxury, but it was hers. The day passed slowly. Daniel helped her fix the rocks near the entrance that had loosened during the storm. He built a small wooden rack to keep firewood dry. Naeli watched him work and sometimes pointed to show where something could fit better. They worked side by side, and though neither said much, their cooperation felt natural, almost like they had done it before. In the afternoon, they sat together near the fire again. Naeli began to hum softly, a tune that sounded like the wind passing through the pines. Daniel listened quietly, letting the gentle sound fill the air. It reminded him of songs his mother used to hum long ago, before life had grown heavy with work and loneliness. When the sun started to fall behind the trees, the cave grew dim again. Daniel felt a strange mix of calm and sadness. He knew he couldn't stay forever. He had to return to his cabin, his tools, his work, but something inside him didn't want to leave yet. Naeli seemed to sense his thoughts. "Snow deep," she said softly. "You wait." Her eyes met his, calm and kind. That night they sat together while the fire crackled softly. Daniel told her about his home, a small cabin near the valley where he had lived alone since his wife's passing. He said he used to think silence was his only friend, but now he saw it could be shared without pain. Naeli listened, nodding slowly, understanding more from his tone than his words. She told him about her husband, how they used to collect herbs near the river, and how he always believed the mountains had spirits watching over them. When he was gone, she couldn't live near people anymore. The cave had become her shelter, her memory, and her prayer. Daniel didn't pity her. He respected her. The way she carried herself, the way she found strength in quietness, it touched something deep inside him. He realized that peace didn't always come from people or comfort. Sometimes it came from stillness, from being where you truly belong. The next morning, Daniel tried to leave, but the snow was still too deep. He turned back and Nayeli smiled faintly as if she already knew he wouldn't get far. So he stayed another day. Together they made small repairs around the cave. He fetched branches for the fire, and she showed him how to find herbs hidden beneath patches of snow. In the evenings they shared simple meals, sometimes laughing when they didn't understand each other's words. As the days passed, Daniel started to feel something he hadn't felt in years: belonging. He no longer felt like a lost man wandering through life. There was meaning in every small act: fetching water, breaking ice, lighting a fire. Each moment was quiet but full of life. One morning, when the sky turned blue again and the snow softened under the sun, Daniel knew it was time to go. He packed his tools and put on his coat. Nayeli watched him silently, her hands resting in her lap. He looked at her and said gently, "You've been kind to me. I'll never forget this." She nodded and replied, "Cave still here. Fire still warm?" He didn't know what to say to that. It was a promise in its own way, a reminder that some places and some people stay in your heart even when you walk away. Daniel stepped out into the bright snow and made his way down the mountain. Every few steps he turned back to see the small, dark opening of the cave. Smoke still rose gently from it, curling into the sky. He smiled, feeling warmth inside his chest even as the cold wind brushed his face. When he reached his cabin, everything looked the same as before: the tools on the wall, the half-cut logs outside, but something inside him had changed. The silence didn't feel empty anymore. That evening, he made a fire, just as Nayeli had done, and sat quietly watching the flames. For the first time in years, he felt peace. Weeks passed and the snow began to melt. The rivers ran again, and green slowly returned to the valley. Daniel went back to work in the forest. Sometimes when he worked near the ridge, he would glance toward the mountains and think of the cave. He started leaving small gifts near its entrance: dry firewood, coffee beans, sometimes flour wrapped in cloth. He never stayed long, just enough to place them carefully and walk away. Days later, when he came back to that spot, he would find something left for him in return: bundles of herbs, a small carved wooden charm, or a few dried berries. Nayeli never appeared, but her quiet messages said everything. They didn't need to speak to understand. As seasons changed, their silent friendship continued. People in the nearby town began to talk about it. They said the lumberjack had found an old Apache widow living alone in the mountains, and that the two helped each other through every winter. Some called it strange, but those who knew Daniel saw the difference in him. He smiled more, spoke softer, and carried a calmness that came from somewhere deep. Years later, when Daniel grew older and his hands weren't as strong as before, he still visited the cave once every winter. Sometimes he saw faint smoke rising, sometimes not, but he always left something behind. He never tried to disturb her peace. He knew that her world didn't need words or noise. It just needed respect. It wasn't a love story, not in the way people often imagined. It was something quieter, something purer. A story about two lonely hearts finding comfort in silence, about kindness that didn't need to be spoken. In that cold winter cave, two strangers had shared warmth, not because they were bound by destiny, but because they were human. And even after many years, when travelers walked through those woods and found a small stack of wood left near a stone cave, they often wondered who kept the fire alive there. No one knew the full story, but the mountain did. It remembered the lumberjack who once sought shelter, and the widow who offered it. Their quiet friendship remained in the wind, in the rustle of the pines, and in the warmth of every fire that followed.